Il arrive, vous m'entendez?
Oui.
On attend peut-être que les participants, le décompte des participants soit terminé.
Oui, parce que là, nous sommes à
33, 34.
31, oui. On avait 76 inscrits.
D'accord, donc on va attendre un petit peu.
Avec une personne qui vient de m'envoyer un message parce qu'elle ne peut pas être là.
Vous me dites à M. Hubert si vous voulez qu'on commence tout de suite ou si on
Je pense qu'il vaut mieux commencer. De toute façon, ils prendront en route. Hein.
Oui.
Oui, très bien. Bien, écoutez, bonjour à tous. Bonjour à tous les participants. Donc, tout le monde n'est pas encore connecté, mais cela se fait progressivement. Donc, je vous remercie au nom de l'Institut franco-américain de participer donc à cette première expérience. Il s'agit donc de la première web conférence organisée par l'Institut franco-américain. Et c'est donc M. François Huber qui va, si je peux me permettre, essuyer les plâtres de cette première réunion par visioconférence. Donc, l'Institut franco-américain le remercie très chaleureusement. François Huber est donc consultant international. Il a une très longue expérience dans le domaine des affaires et de l'ingénierie des affaires. Il a évidemment un lien très fort avec les États-Unis, lien conforté par le fait qu'il est président de l'association Global Brittany, qui est une association qui s'efforce de renforcer, de consolider les liens entre les États-Unis et donc notre région, la Bretagne. Voilà, Monsieur François Hubert va donc s'exprimer dans quelques instants. Il a donc la conférence sera en anglais et le titre de la conférence est donc The Surprisingly Perennially Strong US Economy. Et il va parler pendant à peu près 40-45 minutes et ensuite on prendra les questions, mais on vous demande de placer les questions dans la rubrique que vous avez au bas de l'écran Q&R, hein, donc questions et réponses, ou éventuellement dans la partie chat. Et ce sera plus facile si les questions sont placées en bas de page, en bas de la page, en bas de l'écran, donc dans la rubrique Q&R. Voilà, ok. Donc, so we're going to start with the conference given by Monsieur François Huber. And as I said before, we will take questions at the end, okay? So we're all ears now, Monsieur Huber.
Thanks a lot. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And so I'm going to talk about 45 minutes, as Gilles said, about the surprisingly perennially strong U.S. economy. So, of course, in 45 minutes, in this amount of time, we won't have time to get into real details. And I will also not talk about some topics that you would have found probably interesting to discuss as well. So maybe at one point you think, wow, he's not talking about the stock market. And no, I'm not going to talk about the stock market. So it's going to be like that, but I hope you will find this interesting anyway. So the first question is the U.S. economy, surprisingly perennially strong. So I'm not saying that. The guy saying that is actually a lot of people are saying that. And here you see Ben Bernanke, who was chairman of the Federal Reserve. So he says history has demonstrated time and again the inherent resilience and recuperative powers of the American economy. So it is a very strong, traditionally, we all know it's a very strong and dynamic economy. So the first thing we're going to do is to have a look at it and try to understand what that means today, and maybe we'll get some surprises. We have this idea that the US is the first economy, and if we look, the first metric that comes to mind, of course, is the gross domestic product, the GDP. If we look at it in 2019, okay, it's clear. The United States with $21 trillion is definitely the world's first economy. China is a distant second. And you see that if you take China and Japan, you combine it, it's still not as much as the United States. So really very impressive performance. But of course, some of you might say, yeah, but this is real dollars. And actually, you know that if you buy something in China and you buy the same thing in the US, it's not going to be the same price. And so if we want to adjust for that effect, it's called the purchasing power parity. And if we adjust for that effect, you have on the right the chart that shows that actually the first economy in the world becomes China with $24 trillion. So this is a 2020 estimate. So that's why you see the US economy shrinking a little bit due to the pandemic, whereas the Chinese economy is expected to expand. But this is only a minor effect. Most of it is the purchasing power parity. And then you see that the US is a close second. And still, if you look at, so now the third one is India. And if you combine India, Japan, and Germany, you're still lower than the American economy. So even if it's not the first one with that metric, it's still really a leading economy in the world. So really an extremely powerful economy. Now, if we look at the figures per head, which is also an interesting angle to look at national economies, then it is really very, very impressive, because you see that the US is the only economy in the world at that level. So here it's not the GDP, it's really the income, because I wanted to kind of make it personal. We know what is income. And if you look at the average income per head, per capita in the United States, the US is the only economy in the world with this kind of population, more than 300 million people, with this kind of figures. The next economies with similar figures are much, much smaller economies because of much smaller populations. And if you look at China again, or you look at India, then they're in completely different leagues. So again, one way to understand how powerful the American economy is. Now, if we look at the assets, so everything a country owns, then it's even more impressive. And when I say impressive, it's like it's hard to believe, because here you see that the two major economies in the world are the US and China. And if you look at really the figures, so the shares of the assets in the world, the US economy commands a staggering almost a third, between a third and a quarter of the world total wealth. And you see that China, the next biggest, the next big economy, is a bit more than half of that. And if you look at quickly at the figures for the European Union or Europe, if we include the United Kingdom, if you combine them all, you arrive at something similar to China. So the US is really very, very impressive with this metric. However, of course, this is economics. This includes the natural resources. This includes the real estate, the stock market. So different categories of assets. And these assets don't have a fixed value, of course. They depend on a lot of factors. And so it's kind of a picture for 2019, and this can evolve. Okay, it's not just a mountain of money, and even money, by the way, can change because of the exchange rates. So it's the picture of wealth of the countries in the world. And now, if you look at the dynamics, of the American economy. There also, it's really surprising because you see that, okay, so this is between 1929 and 2016. So you have two major events. The first one on the left is the Great Depression, and then you have the Second World War. If you discount these two major events, you see that the American economy basically never stops growing. There is an occasional recession, but it's quickly erased by very significant gains in the economy. I've tried to compare it with the French economy, which is also, so the French are not going to believe that, but the French economy is pretty stable and pretty positive. If you look at this, you see only 3 recessions in the last few decades. But if you compare the two economies, you see that most of the time, when the French economy is growing, the U.S. economy is growing even more. So it's really a very dynamic economy. If you look at the figures, of course, here we're comparing advanced economies. If you compare the figures for China, of course, they're much more impressive, but it's an intermediate economy, an emerging economy grown to intermediate. So they're starting from a much lower base. So it's really surprising because you have a very, very powerful economy, very large economy, and on top of that, it's still growing at very healthy rates. And now, if you look at trade, the figure is more mixed because if you look at the raw figures here, you see that the American economy since the beginning of the 90s has been in a constant deficit. So the U.S. is buying much more to the rest of the world than it's selling. That's what it says. But, however, again, the figures are a bit misleading because if you look at these figures in terms of GDP share, then you realize that most of the time, if you keep in mind the growth we've seen in the last slide, most of the time, actually, the United States, the deficit is much smaller or smaller than the growth of the economy, which means that it's a little bit like if you make more money and you use some of that extra money to buy stuff, you don't actually get poorer, right? You get richer a little bit slowly. So up to now, the U.S. economy could afford this kind of deficit. So the question is, can it still afford it, or will it still be able to afford it in the future? But if you look at the figures right now, it's not really worrying. The trend can be discussed, but the figures themselves are not really a problem for the American economy. And so maybe at this point, okay, we have the picture of how strong the American economy is, and we can ask ourselves, okay, why is that? What are the reasons why the American economy is still so strong, so large, and so successful? And so there are a number of things you can interpret as luck. So we have, for instance, the world wars. So the the U.S. Were heavily involved in the First and the Second World War. However, if you look at the impact on the major economies of the time, so European economies, the impact was really very, very significant on these economies. But not on the American economy, because not only the American economy wasn't damaged by the wars, because apart from the attack on Pearl Harbor, there was no destruction on American soil, and certainly no destruction on the continental U.S. But on top of that, the U.S. was heavily involved in rebuilding the economies. And if you remember, for instance, the Marshall Plan, that was kind of a starting point for the global presence, not a starting point because the US was already heavily involved in international trade, but it was another reason for the US to really get a commanding position in international trade because they had to be involved. The world was really needed the American economy, and they were ready to do that. So that really helped at the right moment the American economy to grow. If you look at other impacts like the colonial adjustments, here we're in 1920, and you're looking at the colonial empires, mostly of European powers. If you look at that, of course, the picture has changed a lot in the 20th century of course, for the French Empire, which is now a collection of confetti around the world. And for the British Empire, of course, which was the leading power at the beginning of the 20th century, and might now be reduced to merely England after the Brexit. You have an enormous impact on large economies, and including other countries such as Spain, Portugal, Belgium, and so on. What about the US at the same time? Well, they lost the Philippines, you see on the right-hand side. They kept Hawaii and Puerto Rico. So really not an enormous impact on the American economy with these adjustments. And so the relative position of the US improved because of that. And if you look at the other major trend after the Second World War and the evolution of the colonial empires, the Cold War. The Cold War did have an enormous impact on the Eastern Bloc. And most of the economies haven't recovered yet. If you look at Russia, if you look at Eastern Europe, I mean, even Eastern Germany hasn't recovered yet from these 4 or 5 decades of 40 to 89, almost 5 decades of lost growth. Only China has recovered in the 21st century to some extent, not entirely. So in the meantime, the American economy grew like never before. It was a golden age for the American economy. So really, so I started this section talking about luck. Of course, it's not just luck. It was choices and it was by design. But it turned out pretty well for the American economy compared to other powers that could have grown at the same time, that could have played their cards differently. And one of the last things, of course, and maybe we could have started with that, is just the extraordinary resources of the United States. Of course, here you see lots of land put to good use to grow a variety of crops. You see the mineral resources, lots of resources that Americans could put to good use because of this large population, this large country they have. So a community of more than 300 million people with lots of resources to exploit. So that was, of course, always been an excellent starting point for the American economy. You can even think of, there's a French traveler in the US in the 19th century who said you were so surprised by the way Americans would use wood, because there was so much wood that Americans would have a fire going everywhere. You could go to any house, there would always be a fire going. Whereas in Europe, you would save the wood. You know, wood was a precious resource. And in the US, of course, billions of trees were felled over the years because they were just there, they were available. Here you have one of the examples of today's developments, the way Americans can use these resources. You see that the production in green, the American production of oil peaked in the 1960s and then slowed until the beginning of the 21st century. And then American engineers developed fracking. So it's a way to extract more oil from the ground and by just tapping a well. And they developed this technology, and that allowed the US to become the first producer of oil now in a 21st century, way ahead of Saudi Arabia and all the other group of producers. So the American community is still able not only to use the assets, the extraordinary assets they have, but also to really take advantage of them marginally better than the other communities in the world. So very impressive result, which leads us to probably think a little more about what is specifically American in the way the US exploits this economy. So first of all, it's probably interesting to look at the market size. The American market has had an enormous middle class like forever. If you look at the left of this chart, we're in 2000, and you see the American middle class. So this is the middle class of the world. You see the American middle class in purple is about a quarter of the world's middle class. Fully a quarter of the word middle class in 2000 were American consumers. And if you look at the light purple area, this is the European Union at the time. This is a fragmented market. The European Union is supposed to be a single market. There's been a single market for now 3 decades, but the result, and you know that if you live in France, the result is that when the French companies sell something to French-speaking Wallonia in Belgium, it's still an export. You know, and they're still selling abroad to another country, and a number of European countries don't even use the euro. So it's not a single market. It doesn't behave like a single market, but the U.S. has one currency, one language, one, you know, and definitely people in New York selling something to people in California don't consider it like an export. So you had this huge middle class ready for everything that could be consumed, and on top of that, with a mindset of the middle class, of consumers. American consumers don't shy at buying things, anything you can sell. If it's interesting, if they can use it, they'll buy it. And they even borrow to buy it. So this is a tremendous engine for growth and for the power of an economy, and very different from sometimes, you know, this behavior we have in Europe, like oh, it's expensive, no, maybe, or I'm going to save my money, or you have in Japan, you know, people save money instead of buying. So this has helped the United States in the 20th century to build an infrastructure, ecosystems, what we call business clusters, to serve this enormous market, and benefit enormously from that infrastructure. If you want, when the current wave of globalization started in the last quarter of the 20th century, the U.S. was ready. They had everything they needed. They had the Silicon Valley. They had the big 3 automotive makers in Detroit. They had Boston with the biotechnology. They had everything. And so it was easy for American companies to expand in the American market, use the economies of scale they had there, and then compete with other countries where the domestic market was much smaller and where companies were not as competitive. And so that gave American business a tremendous advantage over their rivals. And if you add to that this incredible entrepreneurship spirit, then you see here a very, very impressive list of former and current entrepreneurs, pioneers, and so on. So starting on the left with people who were not entrepreneurs, but Lewis and Clark, who already had this pioneer spirit, and they want to put the wagon trains, but really you have this spirit, and these people who are ready to go and try something new and get rich, and in a way that is very American, because these people didn't have what you have in European economies, for instance, where people are more conservative. It's more about incumbents. It's more about traditions. It's more about the conventional way of doing things. In the US, it has always been possible to do other things because the rules were not written, because there was a new horizon, there was a new frontier, and so the 21st century example is this Tesla Roadster going to the sun. So probably a very stupid thing to do, but really an example that the sky is not even the limit for the American economy and for American business people. So we have that, and I just realized, by the way, that I should have included a number of women, because there are plenty of women as well. So my mistake, and really my apologies to women in the world, and especially to American women. So this is really, of course, one of the cornerstones of the American success or success in the economy. And again, it's important to understand that an economy is not just based on figures and strategies and things like that. It's also based on the behavior of the customers, the behavior of all the stakeholders. And so you have the entrepreneurs, you have the government, you have a number of rules and so on, but you also have the consumers and the way they look at what they want to do and what they want to achieve in their lives, what they want to buy, what they want to build. And if you wonder for a second, okay, the average household in the US or in Europe, what do they want in their lives? Well, basically they want the same thing. Probably, if you ask them, they want a house and 2 cars and a number of things in it. The problem is, or the question is, if you look at the house that the Americans want to have on the left, okay, that's the kind of house they want with 2 cars. And on the right, you see the kind of house Europeans want with the cars. And that's what it is. I mean, I have a house like the one on the right and a car like this one, and I'm quite happy with that. Well, Americans prefer a car like the one on the left, and rather than the average European car that you have on the right. So just this is already a potential and a reason for the American economy to grow. And if you go to the roots of this, probably you have to mention immigration, because apart from the Native Americans who immigrated tens of thousands of years before the other guys, the rest of the American population is immigrants, and immigrants have expectations. They don't go to the US just because they don't feel good where they are, but also because of the American dream, of course. And these guys have been at the root also of the success of the American economy. They've been pushing for things to happen in a way that that just didn't occur in other economies. And then if you think of the economy also with this angle, in terms of expectations and things you have to do if you're in the American economy, there's also a number of differences. They're typically American, but not necessarily linked to Americans, but really about America. Here you have on the left a map of the US with European cities as they would be in terms of distances and latitudes. And on the right, you have the European map or the map of Europe and its surroundings with North American cities, again, with the distances and the latitudes. And if you look at that and you realize that most of Europe is actually close to water, close to a sea or to an ocean, whereas the continental mass of the US is huge by comparison. You just realize that the climate is more extreme. If you're in Spain or in the south of France, probably a number of areas where you don't need heating and you don't need air conditioning because the weather is just fine. If you look at the US, if you live in the north, in the Midwest, you probably need both air conditioning and heating because in the winter it's very, very cold, and in the summer it's very, very hot. So that's included in the GDP. I mean, you have to heat, you have to do air conditioning. That's more economic activity. If your habits is to not to take care a lot about recycling, about waste, and this kind of things, well, this is also this has an impact on the economy. Your economy is bigger, not necessarily because you get more than what you would get in Spain, but because you need to do more to get the same as what people get in Spain. So this is also, in some respects, something that probably affects the American economy. And here you just have a comparison of where the population is in terms of latitude. And you see that actually the American population is much further south than Europe. And again, because of the continental aspect, that means that they probably use much more air conditioning, but also not necessarily less heating. And if you look at the way the European citizens spend their money, there's also a number of questions. For instance, here you see on the right the expenditures on health per head. And you see that France is almost at the bottom. It's the third from the bottom. You see that the American expenses are more than double the French ones per capita, which is really surprising because the result of that is probably not very different. I'm not even sure American citizens get better than the French citizens for that expense, for that level of expense. So that's a question mark. Apparently, you need to spend more money in the US on about this to get about the same thing. If you look at the way the American society deals with crime, there's also a number of question marks linked, of course, probably to the war on drugs and to the legislation about weapons. And you see that the US is by far the first place in the world in terms of number of prisoners. So it has become a business, and the way the American society deals with crime in a very repressive manner rather than a social manner is also a question. It's an open question. You wonder why spending so much money doing things this way. And it's not just about money, of course. Money is probably not just a second or third or fourth issue. And then you have the military spending. Here you see on this chart that the US spends more than half more than a third of the money spent in the world on military equipment or general expenses. And China again is not even half of that, and this is actually an improvement, because the U.S. For a very long time used to spend half of the world sums spent on military. And the reason why it's going down in terms of share is not because the US is spending less, but because countries like China are spending more. So there's also, the relationship between the US society and the army is very special. And then you also have the military lobby that encourages this special relationship. So when I say military lobby, including the businesses, of course. So it's also an open question. The U.S. Economy is is partially also about this, and so other countries. So hence the disagreements between the U.S., for instance, and Germany recently, or other European countries, because they don't spend a lot on military. So it's economic and also political questions. And here you have another example, but we could find others. Of course, the litigation costs. This idea that if you get burned while drinking coffee at McDonald's, you can sue McDonald's and possibly get $10 million. So there's a lot of money spent in the U.S. about things like this, and traditionally much less in other economy, even advanced economy, OECD economies. Another thing is, of course, because the American economy is dominant, there's a number of benefits from that. The first one you can think of is the very powerful dollar. So here you see that the foreign exchange reserves at the bottom, more than half of them is dollars, and you see that the second one, the euro, is far from being at the same level. And this is 2017, so it's improving or changing, but slowly. The euro was there for a long time when these figures have been established. And if you look at the global currency, the global payment currency on top, the euro seemed to be in good place this time, but all this includes payments within the European Union. So all the payments that are made from Germany to France, for instance. So if you remove the intra Eurozone payments, the share is much smaller. So the US dollar is still very, very dominant in the world economy. And if you think of the American banks probably benefiting from that. Okay, if you look at the charts today, in 2020, the American banks don't look as dominant as they used to be. You see them in the middle and at the bottom. So 4 large American banks in the first, I don't remember, maybe 15 banks. So China and even Japan or the EU seem to have more, also a large impact, but China certainly. But actually, the situation on the ground is a little bit different. If you look at, for instance, the story of Carrie Lam here on the right. So this lady is the China-backed leader of Hong Kong. And because of the political turmoil in Hong Kong in the last couple of years, the Americans, the U.S. government has imposed sanctions, political sanctions on the members of the Hong Kong government, which means that Carrie Lam doesn't have a bank account. So she's paid in cash, and she has explained recently that she has piles of cash, banknotes in her apartment, in drawers, in her furniture. She has plenty of cash because no bank in the world is ready to open a bank account to her, including the Chinese banks, because they think if we do that, the retaliation from the American banking system will make them totally unable to work properly in the world economy. You know, the position of the U.S. In a financial system is still very, very strong, and this is really a striking example. And of course, the U.S. business. Here you have the Fortune 500, so the first 500 companies by revenues in the world, and you see that the amount of the number of American companies is really extraordinary compared to the rest of the world, both in terms of revenues and in terms of numbers. And you can even think of the future of business. If you look here at what is the spearhead of business today, the internet platforms, you see here that Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, all these companies are really incredibly powerful in the world. If you look at Europe on the right, Europe is barely on the map, and North America is really absolutely dominant. And so the last thing we can discuss, the open question now is, what could possibly go wrong? Is this going to go on forever? Is the American economy dominant, period? Or could there be any problems? There are a number of issues. Here you see the tuition fees in the cost of learning in American colleges, and the progression of the median income of American citizens. And you see that more and more people actually in the US cannot afford to go to college. They just can't pay for their education. And this is one of the key reasons why you have the divide here. You have the states in the last presidential election, and the size of the population for each of the states. And so you see that usually the map looks red because there's a lot of states where people voted for the Republicans. But if you look at the size of the states, it's actually much more balanced than that. And you see that, okay, you have 80 million voters who voted for, or 81 million voters who voted for John Biden. And that's kind of reassuring if you think, but 74 million people voted for another 4 years of Trump. And the reason is, one of the key reasons is that these people are desperate because the transition of the global economy, you know, transitions to software, to robots, to the end of the coal industry. Plenty of jobs are moving to other sectors, and these people just can't follow. And if you remember the last year's conference about how Americans think that people have to fend off for themselves. It's not the government's business to help citizens or to show them what to do. Americans are free; they take care of themselves. And this is an enormous problem here, because in these 74 million voters, probably tens of millions don't know what to do in the current economy. They don't know how to move on. They don't know how to make a living. So this is showing cracks, and yeah, I wanted to show you that also. If you look at the state of New York, you have the same, you know, there is no blue states and red states. If you look at all the states, what you see is the urban area is blue and the non-urban area is red. And probably if you zoom in the urban areas, you will still see a number of voters who don't know what to do because they don't know how to move on with the changes in the economy. And then you also have situations that are still entrenched in the American society, like here you have the black and white segregation in major metro areas, where you see that the segregation is enormous. You really have white neighborhoods and black neighborhoods, and they have a different, they live in different worlds. They have a different They have different education, different schools, different jobs, and so on. So this is really getting intractable, and there are many things. So I already mentioned the war on drugs. So the American is reenacting the prohibition, and we've all the same consequences. So the Salvation Army, it's the same thing. You know, the U.S. government is not supposed to take care of poor people. It's charities that are supposed to do that. The problems with weapons and so on. There are other problems more important for the economy, like what we call the creative destruction. When you're creating something, you're destroying something. You're creating a renewable energy industry. You're destroying the coal industry, and this is increasingly getting a problem in the US. The US has traditionally been very good at creative destruction. You want a new building, you just destroy the old building and you move on. And if the economy has difficulties, well, workers provide the flexibility, not companies. So companies are really moving on quickly. They lay off workers, and the workers are flexible and they find another job and so on. That was the mindset. And this mindset is slowly changing, or maybe not that slowly, but progressively changing. You see more and more evidence that well, you have white elephant. You have here the zombie companies are companies that are not really turning a healthy profit. They just merely survive, and their assets are going down slowly, but they're still alive. And this is unusual. Normally in the U.S., you succeed, or you close your door and you move on to something else. Remember that during the financial crisis in 2008, the US government bailed out automotive companies. And that was the first. Normally, the US government doesn't bail out companies. The crisis started because the government didn't want to bail out a bank. But later on, you know, okay, Chrysler or General Motors, these companies can't go down. It's white elephants. So this is a worry in the U.S. economy. And just a few topics to conclude. You have this extraordinary sentence from Trump that the European Union is a foe, and he was talking about international trade. So this is really the word looks upside down when we read this, because the U.S. was always the first defender of international trade, and the idea that we were working together and it's not a zero-sum game and so on. Having an American president speaking mercantilism like in the 17th century, you know, not understanding the basic fundamentals of trade, this is just scary for the world, but even more for the American economy. Because if you look at the American economy, you remember this this chart with the middle class. We're in 2020 now, so you see the vertical red line, and we're moving to the right, and you see that the share of the middle class in the world, the share of the middle class of the American population is diminishing, and so this will no longer be one of its main advantages. You know, it's domestic market. It's not a given. If you look at the FAAMG, you know, Facebook, Google, Amazon, and so on, they are extremely powerful companies, but today the European Union, for instance, tolerates these companies, even though there are issues about the way they're paying their taxes and the impact they have on the European economy. But there's no real God-given reason why the European economy is going to tolerate that if it's an issue. And if the American government doesn't play the game of world trade, the American economy can do, the European economy can do what the Chinese have already started to do and say, okay, we don't need you. If Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, and all these companies stopped to operate in the European market today, probably in a couple of weeks we would have a replacement. In a year or two, we wouldn't even see the difference. These companies have never invented anything, I mean, in the main activities, that was so complex or incredible that it couldn't be replicated by a European company. If you think of Facebook, you can invent Facebook anytime. So that's very impressive, but not necessarily very sustainable. And if you look at and I see I have to conclude now. If you look at the American deficit, the trade deficit, this is also a question mark, because basically the bottom part, if you look at the top part in blue, it means this is what the US is selling to the rest of the world, basically. So what the US is selling to the rest of the world is typically sophisticated things that an advanced economy can produce. Not only that, but the engine of this is about sophisticated things. If you look at the bottom part, it's more like what the US buys to the rest of the world, and there's a lot of things the US buys from China, for instance, are not that sophisticated. And if you think, how is this possible? Why do we have this discrepancy? One of the explanations, there are many explanations, but one of them could be that a large part of the population cannot afford very sophisticated, very expensive things, and they're buying cheap stuff from the rest of the world. And so there seems to be like a small share of the American population is involved in the new economy, if you want, and a large share is involved in the old economy. And the people who really make a lot of money don't buy so much. Basically, the American customer needs the cheap stuff because they don't have a lot of money. So this is an enormous imbalance. Again, it's not the explanation, but you see this kind of imbalances, and that triggers questions. Then you have immigration. If the American dreams is there, immigrants will come, and not just immigrants that are going to pick fruits in Southern California, but immigrants who come because they want to complete their PhD, because they want to work in American startups and so on. Who's in charge? In the last 4 years, the American government has a tradition of having the most competent people on earth. And that wasn't the case in the last 4 years. So if this is happening again, that could have an impact. The power of the dollar, when we're talking about, okay, I was comparing with the euro or the yuan or the yen, but what about virtual currencies? You know, that the Chinese are preparing something with the yuan about that. So there are other ways for the world economy to bypass the dollar now. What is the relationship with the other countries? A lot of countries in the world used to feel protected by the United States. And if we have more of the America first attitude, then it's going to be alliances. But alliances are more flexible, and there is no dominant player in an alliance like there is in this protection system. And so the question is, where are the dynamics? The dynamics we used to look at the US first to think of what is going to happen in the future. And is the US going to remain, and in the US, is the US economy going to remain the center of what happens in the future? It's no longer that obvious. And so that's a number of questions we can think of. And that concludes my speech, and I'm available for any questions you could have. And I see in the chat that apparently there has been a number of them.
Thanks a lot, François, for
Thanks.
a stimulating talk about the US economy. And indeed, we have a few questions, and we also have a few comments. So let me read first one of the comments which has been made, and which is directly related to what you were saying in the last minutes. We see that Wall Street continues to perform despite the global pandemic. However, what is happening for Americans on Main Street with unemployment, food, and credit they cannot repay, etc., etc.? Would you care to comment?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I didn't have time. You've seen that I had to rush the the talk in the end, and so there are two big things that are missing in the picture, and I agree with that. One is the Gini coefficient. So really, the way wealth is broken down in the American population, and it's true that there's an imbalance. In the 20th century, most of the 20th century, there was a kind of trade-off between capital and labor. When the economy would grow, some of the profits would go to labor, some would go to capital. Because of a number of things, so people argue that it's because of the word pressure on labor. Labor can travel around the world very easily. It's there's one notion that we would need to discuss, which is the cost of transaction that causes the global that causes globalization. So we don't have time for that. But the result is that labor is more flexible. Companies can move to countries, or even people can move. So for instance, in Europe, you have people coming from Eastern Europe and moving to Western Europe and so on. So you have more of that. The result is that there seems to be harder, it seems to be harder for labor to bargain when profit is shared. And so profit benefits, and so Wall Street is going crazy. So shareholders benefits, while laborers, workers, just see really marginal increases, if any, of their wages. And if you look even deeper, you see that part of the population, people like me who speak English, who understand things, who know everything about globalization, who don't have any issues changing jobs, can afford to be without a job for 6 months because we live in a beautiful country where you can be paid for forever when you're changing jobs. And so I'm exaggerating a little bit, of course. But in the US, people don't have that. And so I remember an American colleague telling me he was surprised that he wouldn't see so many homeless people in a French city where we were walking. And he told me, incidentally, if I lose my job after 6 months, I'm homeless. I'm like these guys. So in the US, you have a large share of a population that don't understand globalization, that are not able to have international activities, don't understand how to change jobs, how to get new skills, and so on. So these people are, I don't know, on a tractor or on a fishing boat or digging coal or something like that, or the taxi drivers. And when Uber arrives, they don't know what to do. They have no other option. And again, this is a major difficulty because Wall Street doesn't care about that. It's not their problem. They're moving assets. They're not moving people, and they don't care about people specifically, other than assets. And that's what it is. I mean, I'm not saying they're bad people. It's just it's not just what they do. And so, if the American government, if the American society doesn't step in and say, okay, there's a problem now. It's going too fast, and people cannot provide the flexibility for the economy because the result of this is that they're dying. So it doesn't work. So it's really like the exact same situation as the Great Famine in Ireland in the 19th century, where the governments was saying, no, it's up to people to deal with what happens, whereas people were just starving to death by the millions. So yeah, it's a big problem, and it's a problem that the American society apparently doesn't get. Some people think they have an idea. You have the Bernie Sanders, and people say, okay, we're going to turn the U.S. upside down. But if you hear Obama recently, when the calls for defund the police and so on, Obama said, defund the police is not going to work because most people will say, hey, I need the police. So you can't just solve problems like that by turning things upside down. You need to find a way. You need to organize something. And in a polarized word that we have now in the US, where people don't even talk to each other or are unable to do something together. It seems very difficult. I don't see how the next American administration, the Biden's team, I don't even see how they can solve that. It's going to take a generation to solve that, and we don't have that time. It's too late. People are dying right now.
Thanks a lot. Since you're mentioning the Biden administration, we have a question concerning precisely the Biden administration. So let me read the question. How do you think the Biden administration will manage renewing relations with Europe and social advancement with the specter of a Republican challenge in the next presidential election? I know it may be a difficult question, of course, to answer, but
well, it's off topic, okay? Because it's about the American economy, but I take it anyways. It's not a problem. I'll be happy to answer. I think something's broken, right? It's not, and it's not just Trump. Again, 74 million voters in the US have said we want 4 more years of Trump. So it means that they're completely off the chart. They're completely, the relationship that we used to have with the Americans wasn't a walk in the park. It has always been, you know, good and difficult and good but difficult and so on. So okay, we love each other except when we fight. We're frenemies, I could say, most of the time. Sometimes real friends, but very often also frenemies. Okay, that's what it is. But it wasn't a problem up to now. We would disagree, even during the Gulf War, you know, the second Gulf War. Okay, it was the Republicans, it was George W. Bush. Already at that time, we thought, wow, it's impossible that they do that, and we disagreed. And okay, and there was the freedom fries because they wouldn't call them the French fries anymore, and so on. So it was already a bit hysterical, but. We knew that we were trying to do something together. Okay, so we were disagreeing on how to do it more than what we wanted to do. So it was still kind of okay, but we were wondering. And 2001, you know, the 9/11 event started something in the U.S. And this is now bursting. And again, the incredibly difficult situation you have in the US because of these intractable things, because of the weapons, because of the way you treat minorities, because of the way the government or the society treats the people who can't survive in the current changes in the economy and so on. All of this is turning the US into a crazy place where people started to say crazy things, doing crazy things and so on. And so the European governments are not used to that. Okay, we have our own problems. We have the Brexit, we have the yellow jacket and so on, but it's not comparable at all to what happens in the US. So when we start talking to these people and we see that actually half of the American population, after 4 years of this, are still ready to go for it, then we're thinking, okay, anything can happen. Okay, it's Biden. I agree with the question. Is Biden for 4 years? Okay, it's good, but what next? And we don't know what's going to happen next. So things that we can't take America for granted anymore. NATO, the World Trade Organization, the United Nations, all of this. We need to look at this and think, okay, now we're on our own. It's Europe. And all the totalitarian countries we have around, you know, Turkey, China, Russia, even Brazil, you know, all these totalitarian countries now, or not totalitarian, but authoritarian, authoritarian regimes we have around. And even in the US, we've had an authoritarian regime for 4 years. And so we're alone. We're on our own, and we need to get together now. The question is not what we do with the US. The question is becoming, okay, what do we do with Europe? So this relationship is basically broken, I think, for a generation. Until the US get back on track, if they manage to do that, until they solve their domestic issues and present a respectable face to the rest of Europe, we're in trouble. It's going to be very difficult. We're going to try to collaborate with Biden and help and do what we can. But we'll always be like, okay, hope you do well, because now we're looking at what we're going to do.
Okay, so it's a pretty dark picture that you.
Sorry.
Okay, all right. We have several questions about the environment in the U.S. And you mentioned the fact that in terms of resources, the U.S. is obviously a very wealthy country, a very powerful country. You told us about fracking and the questions. For example, this one: if the new governments take into account the environmental aspects, what will be the impact on the industry? And is it possible to measure the impact? So the question has to do, of course, with the possibility of a Green Deal in the U.S. Do you see, or do you think that that the Biden administration may try and deal with the environmental issues raised by fracking and other industrial issues?
Yeah, I'd say it's one of the things where a lot of people would want to have a kind of miracle answer, and there is no miracle answer. It's a very, very difficult issue, and it has always been. If you look at the I don't have time to discuss the rare earth market and the way it evolved from Europe to the US to China and possibly now to some other place, where you just can't deal with the trade-offs of the pollution. You can't deal with the pollution created by this industry. So the US has always been hesitating because if you don't take into account the environment, of course, the economy is booming. It's great. You don't care, you pollute, and that's fine. And so the US has been doing that many times with oil, with gold, with a number of mineral resources. And so you have dead cities. You have cities where people just left because it wasn't safe to live there anymore. So it's really creative destruction. So you destroy the environment, you destroy a whole city. Because you want to make a profit, and then when it's no longer possible, then you move on. So there are examples of that in the U.S. much more than in other places on Earth. But it was sustainable, in psychologically sustainable for the society to some extent. Environmentally, of course, it wasn't. Now, the Green Deal, the Green New Deal, is much more like these Bernie Sanders extremist things, or like the Mélenchon ideas you can have here, than really the New Deal as was organized by the Roosevelt administration. It's not. It's kind of extremist. And so you have two extreme propositions. You have Trump digs coal, right? Okay, it's great to have beautiful coal, he called it, for an industry that is dying, and nicely, and it's great, and you can just read the this week's issue of The Economist to understand everything about the coal industry. Let's get rid of it. The faster, the better. Then the renewable energy, but the renewable energy is not, I used to run a startup in renewable energy storage. It's difficult. If it was so easy, it would have been done long ago. So it's a transition, it's investments, it's mistakes, it takes time, and so on. So the Green New Deal is a good idea. It goes into the right direction, but organizing the transition in the real economy, taking into account, again, the coal miners, taking into account what is technically feasible, what is financially feasible, this is another thing. And so I suspect the reality is, okay, it's on the side of a Green New Deal, but it's probably not as extreme as it's been presented. And so I trust, again, the Biden administration. I'm sure they're going to do something dynamic, significant, and balanced at the same time. But I wouldn't expect miracles. The worst thing would be to ignore the transition. Of course, you have to go as fast as possible in the transition, but sometimes it's not as spectacular as people think. It's not about putting millions of wind turbines all over the place. It starts with insulating your house, for instance, and this is a this is not very spectacular, but I hope Biden will look into this. Rather than doing spectacular things, really solving the problems where it hurts.
Okay, so no miracles as far as the environment is concerned, and we also have a few questions about the health issue, the difficulties as far as the minimum wage is concerned. In that respect, do you think that Joe Biden is going to have to pay attention to what what people like Sanders, obviously, but also Ocasio-Cortez were saying? I mean, they're asking for changes. So do you think the Democrats and Joe Biden, of course, will try to if not make miracles, at least make an effort to help people as far as health is concerned, and also minimum wage?
Well, okay. AOC is really as much as the person is admirable. Her position is kind of extreme, right? So again, I would look in her direction. I think the message, the idea, what she wants to do, that is the right direction. However, in the world where we live, in the American system, you've seen that it was easy for Trumpism to flash Obamacare and to say, okay, this is wrong, and this is we're spending good American taxpayers' money on people who don't do anything to change their lives and so on. So you can't just say, okay, I've been elected, so I don't care about what the Republican voters think. And that's not what Biden said he would do. He said he would be the president of all the Americans. So he was in charge when the Obamacare system was organized, and so of course he will try not only to keep the system that he was instrumental in establishing. He will keep it going, but he will try to improve that. Certainly, I think that's one of the key areas where he can do something really significant. The question is, how can they turn a system that was basically geared for the rich, and not the rich, meaning not just the 1% of people who can afford anything, but for, again, graduate, people with degrees who are employed by large companies that would pay the health costs and so on. And so these kind of wealthiest Americans, maybe the 20 or 30% richest Americans that can afford this kind of system, and they don't really see that it's expensive because either they have the money or the company pays for it. So this system doesn't have any incentive to provide for the poor, like it has in France, because the French system is supposed to care for everybody, and so hence the problems we have, because the French society tries to keep it manageable. In the US, well, if it's expensive, you pay for it. And if you can't pay for it, well, too bad. And so they have to move from that system to a system where, no, we're going to take care of everybody. And so if we have a very posh system to take care of people who barely have enough to make a living, that's not going to work. So it's more than just saying, okay, the rich are going to pay for the poor. They really have to turn the system into something else. Right now, to get the same thing, you pay more than double what you pay in France. So this is one of the key issues, not just saying, okay, we will extend Obamacare to these people and those people, or make it compulsory for this category of workers. So it's hard work, and it takes years. So the problem is we need to have people in place for long enough for these transitions to take place, and 4 years, which is actually 2 years because you have the midterms and so on. So the political cycle is way faster than the organizational cycle for a country of 300 million people.
Okay, thanks a lot. One final question, maybe. We had a question about the American dream. The question is, where is the American dream for colored people? So let's say, what's interesting is that your title, using, of course, a quote from Ben Bernanke, the surprisingly perennially strong US economy, was very optimistic. The title is optimistic. And yet, the picture that you drew is rather dark. So would you say that the American dream is being replaced, let's say, by the Chinese dream?
I think the Chinese dream is very bleak. So I'm sorry, I'm not very optimistic this evening, but I don't see any dream in an authoritarian regime. The China is currently, I've been discussing that for years with a number of international people. An authoritarian government like the Chinese government, when the growth is slowing down, the only legitimacy that the Chinese government has is that it provides growth for the people. And so when this is going down, the only way they have to deal with that is to start getting in trouble with their neighbors in India, in the South China Sea, and with Japan, so it's and with the US, of course. So it's dispiriting. So I don't think there is a Chinese dream right now. There would be a Chinese dream if the Chinese had another option. But right now they're stuck with the government they have. At least the Americans have another option. They're not stuck with Trump. And we'll see that in the next few years, probably, because this guy is going to become, the person himself, he's going to become more and more irrelevant. He's never been really relevant. He's just been lucky to be at the right time. So the person himself, he has no talent, no nothing. He does nothing, not even money, actually, probably. So so the guy is going to be relevant, but the issues are going to stay. So again, the question is the 74 million voters. It's not the, I wouldn't even call it ideas, the concepts, the topics that the current Republican Party is peddling. So the American dream has got to get rid of the American nightmare first. It's the idea. I think the American dream is still there, but Americans have turned their society into a nightmare for more and more of them. So get rid of the American nightmare, and then the American dream will be there stronger than ever, I would say. And we can help here in Europe because we haven't worked enough on the European dream. And that's our duty. That's what the world is expecting from Europe right now. We're the only place with a stronghold of democracy, with a stronghold of really the great values of the advanced societies, if I can put them this way. So we need to have a strong European dream so that Americans can believe, so we can lead the way and so on. And because you remember the situation where Trump was saying bad things about Sweden or Denmark. It was so ridiculous. These countries are the most advanced on earth, and he was looking down on them, whereas they're not even in the same league for what he was talking about. So we need to help the American dream to come back.
Okay, thanks a lot, and we will conclude with this optimistic note.
At last.
Thanks a lot, François, and thanks to all the participants who joined tonight to attend our first web conference. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.